Welcome back, guys. This is the Illegal Defense. We're going to get straight into episode 12. A lot of great college games that we had last week. We're going to get right into it with the Big 12 matchup.
Yeah, like you said, start off with the Big 12, TCU. All eyes on them. They're kind of the big, player in terms of really dictating their own destiny. They had their, undefeated season. There's some other teams with these undefeated seasons. We know Georgia, Ohio State, and Michigan, who we're going to talk about all those guys as well. But TCU is kind of the team that's really on the bubble there because the feeling is if they don't keep winning, then they'll be out
They'll
of
be
it.
straight out of it. Yeah.
But they come in a thriller against Baylor. They go on the road to Baylor, play them, and yeah, they're able to pull out yet another late win. This time in spectacular fashion with the clock pretty much running down.
Right.
They run another play. Special teams kicking unit runs on the field and kicks the field goal as time runs out. The kicker doesn't even have time to line up. You know what I mean? As a kicker, you see them do they go to the ball, they do two steps, one to the side, however it goes. I'm not a kicker, but however you do that, and he just gets set, kicks it, goes right through, and walk off
still
winner,
undefeated. Yeah.
And
it's a big win for TCU considering the obviously the playoff stakes. We saw, we'll get into the next game, but with TCU, it's just like you said, they're the only undefeated team outside of the three that's in the top three. And with TCU, it's kind of odd because it's kind of like, where do they stand if they lost against Baylor and the other teams like the USC's, the UCLA and Tennessee and things like that. But it was good that they pulled out this win. Great win to have. And then, in the playoff picture, when it comes down to it, we'll see what happens because those conversations kind of get shaky when it's like, oh, they should have beat this opponent by this much or they shouldn't have been this close. But that's a whole nother topic of discussion.
But like you said, important win for them. They stay undefeated. They have Iowa State next as their last game of the regular season. Iowa State is a team that's better than what their record shows they are. So it's no gimme going into that game. But, you got to feel at this point that they'll be able to stay focused, pull that one out. And the real challenge should be in that Big 12 championship game that's already locked in. They'll be playing Kansas State in a matchup there that if they could get through these next two games now undefeated, they pretty much secured their playoff spot, and we'll be seeing them in the postseason. Another game huge for playoff implications. This one kind of the opposite way with Tennessee going number 5 Tennessee going into South Carolina and just getting just running into a buzzsaw there.
Right.
They go in, they lose 63-38.
Yeah, that's insane.
This is without one of, if not the best running back in the SEC, in Marshawn Lloyd, who's been running all over everybody. He's been injured. He was out the week before. There was some thought he was going to be able to play this game. He couldn't go. And despite the fact that he doesn't play, South Carolina just lights Tennessee up, right? Spencer Rattler, kind of, shows that potential that's been inside, kind of untapped that you only see sometimes. It was all out there. The defense, they were able to really get after Tennessee. They, Hendon Hooker gets knocked out of the game. His season is done at this point.
Right, which was really unfortunate considering the season he was having.
Yeah, he had some Heisman hopes and all these things, but yeah, in one game, South Carolina comes and they rip away the Heisman. Not like he was the favorite at this point,
right?
Anyways,
but a respectable candidate.
Yeah, but he's completely taken out of that, and they completely taken out Tennessee of any playoff hopes. So yeah, look, huge win for South Carolina. This is a team that they've been up and down all year. Kind of oddly enough, first game of the year SEC wise was between South Carolina and Arkansas, and both of those teams have potential on the high end to beat almost anybody.
Almost, yeah, exactly.
But then they consistently underperform like randomly, and you just never know when they're gonna show up at their best.
The
Clearly, this was
their best for
one of their
sure.
better performances for South Carolina, and Tennessee. They go and they'll have to regroup and kind of try to finish the season strong without their leader and All American quarterback and Hendon Hooker that was just putting up insane numbers all year. Um, we'll move on to Pac-12 matchup. Big matchup with the crosstown rivals, number 7 USC and number 16 UCLA. This was a big game. Anytime you have these type of rivalries, it's always something to see. Even
Right,
more so when both teams are good. Both these teams been good all year. Pac-12 in general, those top few teams been just back and forth battling it out.
right.
But yeah, USC is able to come out with the win here, 48-45. If anybody watched the game, they would have heard Joe Clack calling it. He kind of said this feels like one of those games where if you punt, you lose. I mean, they combined went almost to 100 points. So
That's crazy.
I believe the over under was somewhere in the 70s, and they blew past that. And they were both offenses were rolling. Look, Dorian Thompson Robinson just really showed out, even with injuring his hand. Really, just gave it all he had, making plays with his feet. Was able to
Yeah,
throw the ball still, even though it wasn't as consistent after that injury. But
right.
yeah, just really gutting it out there. Caleb Williams,
I think he had
guys,
like did probably the best game of his season with this
yeah,
game with this
yeah,
rivalry.
really spectacular performance by him. He's the guy where, sometimes as a, not a fan of like UFC per se,
Right,
someone just, watching UFC to see like how they do and things like that. Um, and Caleb Williams as well, kind of neutral on him as well. Like obviously, he's a great quarterback, but sometimes the way he acts, even sometimes in this game, he's kind of arrogant, comes off. You know what I mean?
no,
Not that I don't like players celebrating or things like that, but sometimes it just feels a little bit over
too
the
much.
top.
Yeah,
But skill wise, I mean, there is no question. I mean, this
yeah.
guy's
He has a
throwing,
great skill set
yeah,
as a
great skill
quarterback.
set. He's able to, sneaky little type of evasion in the pocket, still able to use his feet and had a cannon for an arm that he could also make all the throws with and put the ball right on the money. And
Yeah. I think
um,
the thing that stands out with him from what I've seen just throughout the year is also like, I mean, you talked about his pocket presence and how he's able to step up and do things, obviously evade, but um, a lot of quarterbacks, aside from him and Bryce Young steps into the pocket, makes a throw, and lives with whatever's going to come to him, whether that's a linebacker blitzing, whether that's a D lineman pressuring him. And you see a lot of that with Caleb Williams, and I think that's really the upside of it because we've seen a lot of quarterbacks where they're not comfortable in the pocket. They like to get outside the pocket, especially in college football where the game is so much more fast paced. So I mean, it was again, it was a great game for him, a great game for USC and for Lincoln Riley. Obviously, we spoke about this like earlier on the year. We were like, yeah, it would be great to see this kind of matchup, and I think it lived up to everything that everybody's expected. So
right, for sure, for sure. We kind of went over a bunch of games with playoff implications. We could get into the, I guess, total playoff picture now. We talked about Georgia briefly. They're the clear number one team going into this. They pretty much locked in their chances to go to the playoff. They played Georgia Tech for the last week. That's a pretty much
it's a gimme.
that's a pretty much a gimme. Highly shocking if they were to lose to that game, especially after the rest of the year they had. And then after that, they'll follow that up with a SEC championship game against an LSU team that they should also beat as well.
Right.
So, 2 wins there. They're pretty much, almost guaranteed the number one seed. I mean, I guess maybe they got faulted too if some team does something spectacular to jump them. But for the most part, they'd be the number one seed just by winning those 2 games. If they were to lose, LSU would probably be the one that
Maybe
somehow
sneaks into
could
four.
yeah, but LSU would then it would probably be some type of 3-4 between LSU and Georgia if that was to happen. If LSU beat Georgia, that would really mess up the chances of a lot of these other teams, right? And we'll talk about those teams as well. Huge game that we're going to preview in a bit between Ohio State and Michigan. They're the number 2 and number 3 teams right now. The winner pretty much goes to the Big Ten championship, and from there it's kind of pretty much a guarantee that they get through that. So that's a pretty much 2 seed just by winning this next game. The loser is probably out. If a lot of chaos happens and it's a close game, there might be a case for the loser to get in, but I would say it's very
slim to none.
Yeah, very slim to none. There would need to be a lot of chaos happening for something like that to go down.
Yeah, even just outside. I mean, with TCU, like TCU would have to lose. There'd have to be something that happens with the whole LSU situation in Georgia, and then you figure if LSU beats Georgia, then it's kind of like, why wouldn't LSU deserve that spot?
Yeah, exactly. That's why I said LSU kind of kills a lot of people's narratives when you get that far. TCU, who we talk about, the current number 4 seed, if they win out, they're probably going to be the 3 seed. If they lose one of the games, I know a lot of people talk about, is it fair or not for their team to be out of the playoff picture just by losing one game, where if they were a bigger brand like a USC, an Alabama, a Texas, Oklahoma, even those teams in their conference, that wouldn't be the case. But realistically, we know that's kind of how it's going to go. And if they lose one of those next 2 games, Iowa State first to end the season, and then Kansas State in their Big 12 championship, they'll be out. If they win out, they'll probably secure that 3 seed and move ahead of the loser of that Ohio State-Michigan game. And then for the 4th seed, that's where it gets interesting, right? We have USC. USC won against UCLA. They're going to close out the year against a Notre Dame team. They're going to South Bend to go play that game.
Yeah, and that's
Notre Dame is ranked ninth.
I believe 17.
17, 18, something around that range, right? But they're going in that building. That's a team that seemed to not be as good earlier on, but they certainly kept things rolling, got some big wins. That'll be a challenge for them. And then, so they'll have to get past that and then, winning the Pac-12 championship. That will be against a tough team as well. So things a little more hairy for USC, but if they win out, my guess is they're an easy team to get in. They're not going to move ahead of Georgia, the winner of Ohio State, Michigan, or a TCU team if they stay undefeated. But there's 4 spots. That 4th spot would be theirs, in my opinion, if they, win out the rest of the season.
Yeah, especially with all the implications of Lincoln Riley going there, the brand of USC. Obviously, everybody knows the history of them, and to have them in the playoffs for the first time since they've had the college football playoff emerge, that would obviously be a lot bigger than having a TCU where they can easily just get knocked off by the one
TCU is going to get in over them, but there won't be a choice, so That's why TCU would be 3, USC would be 4. They wouldn't be taking anything from each other. What they would be taking taking a spot from is some other teams, like we'll talk about, like Clemson. Clemson is another team in the running. They're one-loss team, but it's funny how if you look at the dynamics between a one-loss USC team, who everyone is talking about how good they are, and then you look at a one-loss Clemson team where everyone talks about how they've underperformed and haven't lived up to the hype, right? But at the end of the day, it's one loss. And look, Dabo's been there, done this before, certainly has plenty of experience. They would need to win out, right? So they go and they play the South Carolina team that just slaughtered Tennessee. Yeah. They play in their rivalry game to close it out, and then they're going to play in the ACC championship against North Carolina, who kind of had a shot, and then they picked up their second loss, so they're kind of out of the playoff picture. But so they'll have to win those 2 games, and then if something ahead of them happens with one of those teams we talked about, they'd probably be the next shoe-in team. And then outside of that, we talked about, the LSUs and stuff like that. It gets tougher around that point because you have LSU who, if they win, they could probably slide in there.
Yeah.
Outside of that, it's very hard to see other options, right? Tennessee's completely knocked out. Alabama, I don't think could get in at this point.
Yeah.
Tennessee just got knocked out. You look at other teams like Penn State. Penn State, they've actually played a great season. You know, they're ranked, I think, right now around number 10. Their only losses are to Ohio State and Michigan, number 2 and number 3 team. But
But it's tough.
they're
There's a
just
lot of two lost teams, so it's kind of like
yeah, it's a lot of 2 lost teams. So it becomes tough. I mean, I think after that Clemson team and obviously LSU, if you throw them in the mix, that gives you about 6 deep the field. Realistically, things would have to go really, really bad for a bunch of teams for anybody else to get in. Because then I think like a TCU team can pick up a loss, and if a bunch of things happen, they're gonna end up throwing them in. Almost the same with USC. I think people would almost rather have one of those 2 teams in versus you go out and you go grab, an Alabama team who's probably towards the front of the pack of others. You know
just
what I mean?
based off of their history and their status.
Yeah, you're gonna go grab it out. You're gonna go grab, one of these other teams before you go step into Alabama, Penn State, et cetera, there. But yeah, but look, we talked about the playoffs. We can get into some of just the best rivalry games in football. Last week of the season, it's a huge rivalry week. There's
so much stuff's gonna happen.
Yeah, there's plenty of rivalry weeks kind of throughout the year, sprinkled throughout, but this week is kind of the big one where a lot of the big rivalries are. We could start off talking about probably a game that we'll preview and a game that we've kind of talked about, Ohio State, Michigan. Probably it's the biggest game.
It's
the biggest game in college football. Some people try to say it's not. I mean, look at the ratings. The ratings prove it all. Draws the most viewers. And yeah, so it's pretty top of the top there. Everybody, there's other great rivalry games, but that's definitely the biggest one. You can't talk about rivalries without the Iron Bowl with Alabama and Auburn.
Yeah.
It's very similar to the Ohio State Michigan game. Fierce rivals.
We've seen Auburn pull off crazy upsets.
Mm-hmm.
We could talk about the kicked field goal, run back, and then obviously like Trey Mason just going off on them, and there's so many. That's the thing, like with these rivals, there's so much history behind it, where it's kind of like, say for example, Ohio State, they're undefeated now, and Michigan maybe they're 5-3. There's instances where Michigan could come and beat Ohio State just based off of the environment, just based off of the feel of rivalry week. And that's why prior to the playoffs, this is like we've talked about it just a few minutes ago, just how crazy it can be, whereas like so many things can happen, but what we expect is for them to win out or whatever the case is. There's really no, like, at this point, it's like it's kind of up in the air.
November's a free for all, and you can see that by the last few weeks. We've had crazy upsets. I mean, look, college football is kind of like this in general.
Right.
It's even more at this point because the teams are more, there's more stress. There's more things going into these games when you've already come this far and you can see the end of the tunnel.
Right.
So it's like, can you not look ahead to that and stay focused on this opponent who you think you should handle no problem, and that you're focused on, the big dogs up front that you're going to have to get to after the season? Or are you going to look past them and, these guys are going to play hard against you and they're going to take it.
You play down to your competition.
Yeah, and this is even worse when it's specific rivalries where, not just the teams, but the whole fan base, the whole, you go to these areas, the whole towns and cities are involved in this.
Crazy.
And yeah, so it's tough. I mean, look, other rivalries, we had Red River. Red River is always a big rivalry. Not as fun this year with Oklahoma and Texas being down, but it's one that we also get to continue to see as they both move to the SEC. The world's largest outdoor cocktail party between Georgia and Florida. This is a game that they hold in that neutral site there in Jacksonville. I know Kirby Smart has been pretty vocal about maybe not doing that anymore because of how huge that game is, and with the recruiting rules and stuff like that. They rather have it where it moves back and forth to the home stadium, so that way when it's your turn at home, you get to invite all the recruits there. It's a
Right.
huge weekend. But yeah, that's definitely a big one. Always happens earlier in the year. Army Navy, right? We forget sometimes about some of these smaller schools, but Army Navy, I mean, it might be almost as up there as Ohio State Michigan in terms of what it means to those
To those,
programs.
yeah,
I
and
mean,
just in general to that like that branch of military,
right.
like they take that serious.
Yes,
So
that's about as serious as you can get. I mean, you can't tell me that Army Navy is not as important as something like Red River. You know what I mean? So,
right.
huge game, even though they're not competing on for national titles, but they are still competing at a national level, which
Right.
is probably helps the game itself because all across our country and even guys stationed overseas, big for them. It's probably a big weekend when the people we have in serving in other countries for us get to we see sometimes like college basketball, they go and they play on a ship, and
Yeah,
it's always fun
exactly.
for them and big for these guys. So yeah, definitely a lot going on there. And then we have some other ones, Miami, Florida State, lost kind of its luster as both programs are not where they used to be. But we know about the missed field goals in that game and the whole
The
history between the U and Florida State and Deion
right.
Sanders and so much going on there. That's a fun one that hopefully it seems like could have a shot at becoming one of the bigger games again, as Florida as a whole looks to be on the right track in terms of boosting its recruiting again.
Right.
Yeah, and then we have some old ones like Alabama, Tennessee, which might be coming back now. It was a huge game this year, which was fun, and that used to be just as big as some of these other games, and hopefully that'll be another one that we get to see going forward and be a competitive game. Which look,
We've seen it this year.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
I mean, I feel like it only trends upward, especially with what Sark done in Tennessee, and obviously Alabama is Alabama. So
Yeah, Josh Heupel in Tennessee, but
yeah, right. Josh Heupel.
Okay, we could move into preview some of these games. We'll jump right into a game that we mentioned multiple times already. Ohio State, Michigan. Number 3 Michigan goes to Columbus to play number 2 Ohio State. -7.5 spread. The over under is 57 on this one. Lot of hype around this game, being that two top 3 teams, number 2 and number 3. I think this is only the second time in history that it's these kind of stakes with both teams being undefeated coming into this game and the rankings and all that.
Right.
The other time was like 2014 or something like that. So yeah, huge game. I mean, obviously, look, 2 of the biggest fan bases in all of college football here.
Right.
And yeah, a very heated rivalry. I mean, I know, if you go on Twitter, you go through message boards, the stuff that's,
That said is
yeah,
just crazy.
we got people talking about, last year, everyone called Ohio State soft because they lost the game, but there's there's like misinformation beats where people say CJ Stroud can't play in the zone, but then you look at the stats, he threw for almost 400 yards,
Right.
then you have, Michigan, who's been losing the series forever, acting like they're
so good, and
yeah, and then Ohio State fans like kind of just can't really say nothing because they lost the game last year, so they don't have bragging
yeah, they don't have
rights.
no bragging
They're
rights.
just
Exactly.
they're just stewing in anger, like hoping for the games
Hoping
to
just
come.
to have revenge.
Yeah,
in this game, and what's interesting too is like, I mean, for not for nothing, Ohio State. I mean, we talk about bragging rights. It's like if you look at the past 5-6 years, Harbaugh hasn't been able to do anything to Ohio State, let alone bring the program up to what it's at now.
Mhm.
And it's like Michigan, like granted, Michigan's playing great football, but throughout the season, we've kind of even seen them sometimes play down to their competition, where it's like Ohio State, they've pretty much blown out almost every team they come across. They've had maybe 2 games. I guess you could say I mean, you could say last week with
Yeah, you got Maryland, you
Right.
got Northwestern,
But
so
I mean, I don't know. I think Ohio State takes care of business, and especially since they lost last year, they have I think Ryan Day has a chip on his shoulder. He wants to go out and prove that he could win a national title, and this is going to be a statement win for him for sure.
Yeah, I think this program. I think Ohio State's going to be laser focused. I mean, I don't think Michigan is not going to be focused,
Yeah,
but
no, for
I
sure.
don't think there's any question that the caliber of players they have at Ohio State is greater than what they have at Michigan, right? So this is, when you get these type of setups, this is a game that Ohio State is supposed to win with how the recruiting history has been.
Right.
And then you look at the style of offenses, right? And even defenses. Right? Michigan has a good defense this year. Ohio State too. Ohio State, top 10 in most of these categories after bringing Jim Knowles in. Um, but you look at how Michigan wins games. They're winning by running the football. Okay, if you run the football, and by the way, the weather for this game is looking to be like in the 50s and at Columbus, which is almost like summertime weather for these people at this time of year.
Right.
No precipitation of any kind, so it looks to be like perfect weather. So you're gonna tell me CJ Stroud gets to go in there and air the ball out against Michigan, who's gonna try to run the
Run the
ball.
ball and
Not
just
to
not be able
mention,
to
not to
pass.
mention, both teams are banged up at running back. Right? Ohio State has Trevion Henderson, who tried to go last week, couldn't finish the game. Mayan Williams didn't even play last week; he was banged up. They had to go, their third string Dallin Hayden, who had a good game for them. But he's the healthiest one, and this is where the recruiting helps them because they have a guy in Dallin Hayden who's able to run for over 100 yards and multiple touchdowns in the game where they need him to step up. Michigan, on the other hand, Blake Corum got injured last game, and he's their entire offense. And there's been talk that they don't even know if he's going to play. Most likely he's going to play regardless.
Right.
Whatever they got to shoot him up with to get on the field is they'll do it. But you can't. You could get on the field, but if you're not effective,
Then
then
there's
good
no
luck,
point.
right? Donovan Edwards, their second string running back, who's a pretty good running back. He's been injured. He couldn't even go last week. After that, they don't have anything. It's not like Ohio State where it's like, okay, next man up, next man up, next man up. The recruiting hurts them there. They don't have the ability to keep up if Ohio State really gets on a roll and starts putting up a bunch of points.
Right.
That's all you have to do against some of these teams.
Yeah.
We talk about this with teams across all levels of football, right? If you're a team that plays defense, runs the ball, San Francisco 49ers, okay, that's good. But if you let up too many points against
Then you
a
have
team
to
like
try
the
to
Chiefs, then
catch up.
you can't catch up. You don't have the offense to really put up that kind of those kind of offensive numbers. So, but yeah, this is a 7.5 point spread. My guess is Ohio State covers the spread. And I don't think this will be a blowout win, but I can see them winning by like double digits or something like that. Maybe even if it comes down to it. I think it would be. I think there's potential for this to be an easier win than what they got at Maryland's, where they were kind of ahead and then got some, late stuff happen late, to kind of juice up the final score, the box score there. I think this, should be an even easier win than that, where they probably win by double digits, not in super easy fashion. I think it'll still be a fun, interesting back and forth
Yeah, it'll
game
be
at
a
some
gritty
point.
game for
But I
sure.
think Ohio State will be able to pull away enough where the game isn't in that much danger for most of it. We can move on and talk about a number 7 USC going to Notre Dame, and we mentioned this game earlier. Crucial for USC. If they can win out, they'll probably be in the playoffs, and this is step one. Step two would be their Pac-12 championship, but yeah, tough matchup for USC. Just that Notre Dame's been playing well lately, right? They've kind of been peaking at the right time for this game. I would still favor USC to win here. The spread is -5. I think they probably cover this, but I wouldn't be entirely surprised if Notre Dame found a way to pull it upset here either.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna go with Notre Dame, being that they are at home. They don't have much to lose and all to gain. Where USC has a lot to lose. This may put a little bit pressure on Caleb Williams. We saw how he can kind of be a little bit in over his head at times, and with Lincoln Riley, I mean, I think he'll have everybody ready, but I think Notre Dame. they play. It's weird because they're not what we thought they were in the beginning of the season, but I think they're capable of playing up to the competition of other opponents like a USC and I think I don't know. I mean, I if you're at home and it's a big game, I mean Notre Dame has versed USC plenty of times.
every year.
Yeah, so it's like they're do I think they blow them out or anything like that? No, not at all. But I think Notre Dame definitely puts up a fight.
Yeah, I'll tell you this. This is a similar situation to what we were kind of talking about. Well, a team that's defense oriented and leans on the run game versus a team with a more dynamic offense that throws the ball around. Clearly USC is likes to light up the scoreboard,
Right.
put up tons of points, lots of passing yards. Notre Dame is gonna really control time of possession, try to clamp you down on defense. Yeah, look, like I think probably the most likely outcome in this game is USC is able to put up the points that Notre Dame can't. But like you said, Notre Dame, this game is not too big for them. They're trying to continue to make a name for themselves. They're not looking ahead to anything, right?
Right.
This is as big as it gets for Notre Dame right now. The last game of the season, they get to rip the playoff chances out of a USC team and make a statement to kind of build momentum going into next year. So yeah, like you said, it certainly wouldn't be surprising if Notre Dame found a way to really make Caleb Williams have a tough night and be able to control possession, play good defense, and come out with a big win here at home with their home fans. I'm sure going crazy. Last game we'll preview is another game we kind of touched on a little bit. South Carolina, who we know, really took it to Tennessee last year out of nowhere. Last week out of nowhere. They go and they play their rival number 9 Clemson. All these games have one or two teams that we're talking about trying to make these playoffs. Clemson being the team here, and man, big spread -14.5 for Clemson.
Yeah, that's
Clemson
crazy.
did have a pretty nice performance last week. Score was, it was a big score difference game wise. It probably should have been even bigger. This is kind of almost the opposite of what kind of has been happening to Clemson this year, where even when it looks like they won by say 20 points, doesn't really feel like they dominated the game. Last week they did. They completely dominated. Defense showed up.
Yeah.
Offense was clicking. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of Clemson we get this week. It'll be interesting to see what kind of South Carolina we get this week.
They just came off a big win and momentum is a huge thing in sports, as we all know. So
Yeah, this is something that I think Clemson is probably not looking ahead as much as some of these other teams. I think some of these other teams feel so close to the playoff. I think the odd position that Clemson has been in, where they've been kind of getting more negative media and people kind of talking about how they're not living up to certain expectations more. I think they're probably a hungrier team, and I think that might help them in the present for this game. I don't know if they cover this 14.5 point spread.
Right.
That's a bit iffy for me. That'll depend on how they show up, if their offense happens to be clicking that day or not. But this is a game that I do think they'll be able to win. And I think they'll be able to do enough to you know I certainly wouldn't see South Carolina putting up 63 against Clemson.
Yeah, that's insane.
Yeah. So yeah, this feels like more of like a 30-20 type of game to me. If they have really dominant performance, maybe 35-14 or something like that. But it does feel like this is a game that Clemson should be able to handle.
Mhm.
And it'll kind of just be more on will they cover the spread or not, and by how much. So, but yeah, we'll see how that goes. Lastly, we can get into some best bets, and you know, we talk about Clemson's next matchup after that South Carolina game. It's going to be North Carolina in the ACC championship game. North Carolina already locked in their spot, but this week they still have another game before they play there, and that is against North Carolina State. North Carolina, the home team here. minus 6.5 point spread. I like North Carolina to cover the spread here, this 6.5 points. This is a bit of a dangerous position because they they had one loss until last week and then they picked it up. Now, they're not a shoe in for the playoff or anything, and even with one loss, probably not a great chance they were gonna make it, but they had a shot at least. After losing last week, this game is pretty insignificant to them.
Right.
But I do think, their offense has been explosive all year. North Carolina State has been a bit shaky. They haven't kind of lived up to some of the preseason hype that we've seen from them. A lot of talk about their quarterback Devin Leary and the rest of their pieces being able to step up and being a strong veteran team. But North Carolina is a young team. Drake May, just lighting it up out there. Putting up Heisman like numbers.
Right.
And I like North Carolina to be able to just put up a ton of points here and come away with the victory. I think they cover that 6.5 point spread. We have number 17 UCLA going to Cal. UCLA favored by 10.5 points here. Cal is just not a very good team this year. I like UCLA to cover. I like UCLA to come in. We saw, them put up tons of points against USC. USC, obviously not a great defensive team, but still, their offense was clearly clicking, and I think they'll be able to continue to do that. Defensively, I think they can, show up and kind of handle business against a California team that's not very good. And I think 10.5 points spread. I think they could cover that. And this probably feels like a 2 touchdown type of game.
Especially if considering what they were able to do with USC and keeping up with them. So it's like if you could put up that amount of points against the USC team with all the implications that they had, then I think it's pretty much easy to do that against Cal. That's obviously not that good this year. So
yeah, for sure. We have Western Kentucky going to Florida Atlantic University. Western Kentucky, their team, they put up points. They put up tons of points last week. They just ran over somebody. I don't remember who it was. Maybe it was like Charlotte or something like that. They've been doing this, kind of all year. They started off a little bit slow the first game, but this is an offense that was historically good last year. There was a drop off after losing their quarterback to the NFL. He's, with the Patriots, Bailey Zappi now. But they're putting up points. Florida Atlantic can put up points as well. But I think Western Kentucky is the more well-rounded team. They're the better program. I think 7.5 points. I think they'll be able to cover that and come away with the win and cover here. And then a game that we talked about, Notre Dame USC. I know you kind of leaning a little bit more towards Notre Dame, but I think USC should be able to cover the point spread here. Like I said, I would not be shocked if Notre Dame pulls it out. I just think it's probably a lot more likely scenario that USC is just able to put up points like they've been doing all year. And, 5.5 points seems like if you think they're going to win, then they'll probably cover that
sure.
spread. But yeah, that'll do it for this week's episode of college football. We'll see you guys next week. Like, subscribe, leave a comment, and see you next week.
See you next week. Thanks for watching.